And now, on the lowest rated movies on IMDb, we reached number 22, Meet the Spartans from 2008. The fact that it's here just as the Odyssey is about to release soon is legitimately a coincidence. Or maybe that movie has already come out. I don't know when this video will be out with some personal stuff in my life. But the point is, I did not plan this. It is just what was next on the list. I didn't even realize it until some point in the second half of my rewatch of 300 to prepare for this. I'm just opportunistic enough to put the Odyssey in the title of the video and get views. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, yes, this is a parody of 2007's 300. Zack Snyder's magnum opus, a heavily stylized historical epic that took the world by storm. A movie that was very historically inaccurate, but it's okay because the cast is white. And this parody is being done by the kings of awful parody movies themselves, Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer. Way to fill me with confidence. But as we usually do with movies that are linked to others in some way, we're talking about the other movie first. Let's get into 300. It all started when producer Johnny Nunari read the graphic novel 300 by Frank Miller. It was a fictional retelling of the Battle of Thermopylae that was heavily inspired by the 1962 film The 300 Spartans, which Miller saw when he was 6. There was actually already a movie about this battle in production with Michael Mann directing based on the novel Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. That one had a troubled production, mainly due to a lack of faith in the project due to previous historical movies disappointing. Until there was finally one hit in the genre. Yeah, that was when they canceled the movie entirely. But back to 300. Nunari got Michael B. Gordon to write the script. According to IMDb, this was his first script and his first gig outside of an assistant. After this, he wrote G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra and seemingly disappeared. Now they need a director. And there was a newcomer by the name of Zack Snyder. And earlier, he had actually tried to make an adaptation of this exact book but couldn't get off the ground, so he instead made his directorial debut, the Dawn of the Dead remake. And so Nunari found that out and decided to sign him on. Snyder also did some rewrites of the script with Kurt Johnstad, future writer of Atomic Blonde and the Rebel Moon films. Snyder made it a shot-for-shot remake of the comic book, similar to Sin City just a couple years ago, also adapted from a Miller comic. Panels from the book were photocopied to serve as storyboards for many shots. But he also added a subplot about Queen Leonidas just for this movie. Something Miller was against, viewing this as only a guy movie, but Snyder defended it, saying that he wanted to show something specific for the Spartans to be fighting for and to give something for the female audiences to enjoy. And he was vindicated in test screenings when that female audience responded very well to it, leading Warner Bros. To try marketing the movie just a little bit to women as well. The movie was shot in Montreal in chronological order over the course of 60 days with a budget of $65 million. Only one scene was shot outdoors. The rest were filmed in front of a blue screen. The actors trained alongside the stuntman, and according to Wikipedia, even Snyder joined in. I don't know what that means, and the nearest citation just takes me to a 404 error. There were moments on set where Snyder wanted to capture the action exactly as it was in the book, and others where he gave the actors freedom to think outside the box. Gerard Butler said that even though he didn't feel strained by Snyder's directing, the fact that it had to be close to the comic put some limits on his performance. Also, since the movie required a lot from him physically, he pulled an arm tendon and damaged a nerve in his foot while on set. This movie was also the film debut of Michael Fassbender. The special effects were done by Meteor Studios and Hybrid Technologies, and the supervisor and production designer created a new process for this that they called the Crush. It allowed for them to manipulate the colors by increasing contrast of light and dark. They said they wanted to make it look realistic, but also give it a more illustrative feel. And now to talk about my thoughts on the movie. Those artists did a great job, because this looks really good visually. Even the biggest Snyder hater would probably admit that. It gives off a feel unlike any other movie of its kind. And it basically set the scene for how the rest of Snyder's movies would be. For better or worse. Fuck it, I think mostly for better. All in all, it's a worthy successor to Sin City style. Once again, this is not historically accurate. And it doesn't try to pretend to be. Like, there are points when the Persians that the Spartans fight start to look more like the orcs from Lord of the Rings. But if you're upset that it throws in fancy elements, that's on you. It's not like the rest of it is set up to be realistic and this stuff's out of place. The style sets up a comic book retelling and that's what you get. Besides, it's told through a narrator and the people behind this movie and book claim he is meant to be unreliable. So what if he talks some stuff up that probably didn't happen? And that's probably a nice way to look at this movie. In fact, I'd argue that they could have gone further into that and maybe had the soldiers wearing more realistic armor at the end in contrast to their almost nakedness for the rest of the movie. Since this is a new army, or maybe that would just be stupid. Whatever. But no, these guys don't wear armor. It's just a bunch of buff men in Speedos. In one part, Gerard Butler tells a hunchback character that he can't join the army because he can't raise a shield and they can't take somebody with such a weak spot. All while wearing nothing at all on his torso. Frank Miller said he designed them like this because he wanted the Spartans to move better and look good. He also made the helmets cover less of their face so it's easier to identify them. I'm not the first to say it's homoerotic, as evidenced later on in the video. There was a time where I thought, no, just because they're all shirtless doesn't mean they're gay. But they wore armor in real life. Hey, if this movie isn't homoerotic, then why did I just come? Checkmate, liberals. Really, what makes their half-nakedness so homoerotic is the fact that this movie romanticizes being manly so much. There's a reason Macho Man is so big among gay men. And yes, it romanticizes that manliness to a fault, even without the homoeroticism. Spartans were a very battle-obsessed people, and this movie abides by that philosophy. It does portray the less savory aspects. The first scene in the movie shows the baby Leonidas being inspected for anything that would make him grow up weak, and it's done before a literal pile of baby skeletons. But still, the vast majority is a celebration of war and machismo. Apparently, the traditional Spartan cruelty has been toned down a bit. It helped to make them not hateable, but really making their entire personality revolve around war doesn't help to make them very relatable either. Also, there's a scene where they refer to Athenians as boy lovers in an insulting way. Once again, look at how they're dressed. Also, a historian once wrote that was ironic since Sparta also engaged in institutional pederasty. Wait, what does pederasty mean? Oh my goodness, it's that kind of boy love. Forget I said anything, the fascist Spartans are right this time. Also, Snyder admits that he made the villainous Lord Xerxes more effeminate because, quote, what's scarier to a 20-year-old boy than a giant god king who wants to have his way with you? So, yeah. But all that is a little counteracted by the occasional cut to the queen and her story. And besides, all of these Spartans still have more values and honor than any manosphere influencer, on top of being tougher and manlier than them. Anyway, the 2000s were a different time for controversies about historical inaccuracy. In this world, people were complaining about it not being woke enough, particularly with its portrayal of Persians, and the fact that good and evil in this battle was not so black and white in real life. But Snyder and some critics have said that anybody making complaints like this are taking it too seriously. If they're being naive, then I guess I'm naive too. It's meant to be a spectacle, more interested in being a dramatic good versus evil tale than an accurate retelling. Can you pick some fascist stuff out of there? Maybe, but in the same way you can pick it out of a lot of action movies, this doesn't care about its message enough to be legitimately fascist. And the people behind it seem normal enough. What they really care about is making a dramatic experience, and this movie doesn't take a break from showing you something beautiful. Even in the downtime between action, every shot looks heavily stylized and cool. Watching this movie, you buy the scope of it all. These people seem superhuman, and the rest of the world feels like a place where such power can exist. You can definitely see why Snyder would want to make the rest of his movies look like this. This is why men can't stop thinking of the Roman Empire. An unfinished cut of 300 premiered in December 2006 at the Button-Umathon Film Festival. The complete movie was originally set to release on March 16, 2007, but was moved to a week earlier. But it premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival the February before. Before that, it aired at a press screening where many attendees left before it was over, and those who stayed booed at the end. But at the actual premiere, it got a standing ovation. When it premiered, it broke a few hyper-specific box office records. The opening was twice what studio executives were expecting. The overperformance was cited to the strength of Snyder's vision, a swarm of advertising on MySpace, and from the strong female role of Queen Gorgo attracting women too. It just goes to show that even for fascist movies, go woke, make boatloads of money. The constant hot shirtless man probably didn't hurt with the female audience either. Not saying this was the Magic Mike audience, but I just wonder if that had some subliminal effect in attracting them. Anyway, before release, many of these studio executives were nervous that the fact that the bad guys were Persians might be interpreted the wrong way considering this was during the war in Iraq. It apparently started when Snyder was asked about that in an interview, and he said people would be sure to interpret it their own way, but no parallels were intended. But sure enough, their fears were right, as it proved to be inflammatory, especially in Iran, so much that they filed a complaint to UNESCO calling it an attack on their historical identity. The film was banned, with the government calling it American propaganda, but the black market copies of it and tales of its success were enough to cause national outrage. Helped by the fact that it premiered on the eve of Persian New Year, the fact that Iranians tend to view that era as a particularly noble time for them, and, oh yeah, the fucking war. But in most other countries, it was a cultural touchstone for some time. And the following year, the studio announced both that Miller was writing a sequel graphic novel based on another famous Roman battle, and that they were already planning to make a movie adaptation of that book. Zack Snyder was set to direct but drop out to make a little movie that I'm pretty sure won't have that much of an effect on his career. 300 Rise of an Empire appeared in 2014 and was a box office success despite mixed reviews. The In Popular Culture section of the 300 Wikipedia page is mostly about parodies and memes with one smaller paragraph about other stuff. It describes it being parodied by SNL, Robot Chicken, South Park, Mad Magazine, and that the MTV Movie Spoof Award went to a short film called United 300? As in United 93? They parodied United 93? And in 2007? That's like right after that actually happened. But anyway, it also mentions a movie called Meet the Spartans. Why couldn't I just get the 9/11 version?
From the creators of Aladdin and the Little Mermaid.
Didn't know you had a famous father, did you?
Comes the man.
Hercules!
Hercules.
The myth.
I'm an action figure!
The movie.
And hey, 2 thumbs way up.
Hercules.
We dance, we kiss, we schmooze, we carry on, we go home happy. What do you say? Come on.
You know, when people say these videos are well researched, part of me has imposter syndrome since most of my research for these movies comes from Wikipedia. I just check the sources on everything I put in the script, and if the source links to a 404 error, I just presume, well, that fact must be in there somewhere if I could see it. But my knowledge of these films is limited by how much is in the Wikipedia page. And the Wikipedia page for Meet the Spartans has nothing on production. Well, how much could I be missing? 300 was popular, so they made this movie. It's not that deep. It was written and directed by Aaron Seltzer and Jason Friedberg, known for a date movie, epic movie, disaster movie, and a bunch of other parody films that were financially successful in the 2000s, but nobody liked them, and most, if not all, of their most known ones are also on this list, with disaster movie currently being number 1. They're also credited as writers for Scary Movie, even though they probably aren't. Earlier in this series, I watched their Hunger Games spoof, The Starving Games. The big question here is this: is Meet the Spartans worse than that? It's kinda hard to say. I think it was slightly funnier, but it also insulted my intelligence a lot more. The only other movie I saw of theirs in full was Epic Movie back in middle school. It's kind of hard to tell where that falls here because it was so long ago, and once again, I was in middle school, so I had no standards. But from what I remember, it's probably worse than both of them. The best thing that Meet the Spartans had going for it is the fact that it's a parody of 300. There is a lot of stuff to make fun of in that movie, and I say that lovingly. In my Starving Games video, I talked a lot about whether or not I actually made fun of or subverts anything, but I'm not a purist in that regard. I love parody, and honestly I'd be okay with just a silly version of the movie so long as it's funny. But this movie isn't funny, so we're talking about how it parodies the tropes of that movie. And for the first 10 minutes or so, it feels like an actual parody film for the most part. It covers the beginning of 300, which consisted of Leonidas' harsh upbringing and training, and in between the occasional god-awful joke that revolves around referencing some other unrelated movie, this section does a decent job of parodying 300's love of that inhumane lifestyle. It has a few moments that are chuckle-worthy in that low-ball airplane kind of way. I was worried that I might not hate this movie, and I would be that idiot who actually liked Meet the Spartans. But don't worry, it gets a lot worse once the Persians come into it. That's not to say there's nothing else here that makes fun of the actual movie. Like, there are scenes where the leaders want to show their massive army and bring out a literal blue screen, and one of the few genuinely funny moments makes fun of 300's tendency for cheesy one-liners.
Sparta will be annihilated. It will be as though you never existed. I will see to it that you're written out of the history books.
Well, that's fine by me, Xerxes. Because I can't read.
But there is one aspect of 300 that is constantly poked fun of throughout the entire movie. Wanna guess what it is? Wait, I think I already hinted toward it earlier.
What the hell was that?
That is how men of Sparta greet one another.
One of this movie's co-stars is Kevin Sorbo, who would later become a big conservative Christian figure. And they got him to do some pretty gay stuff here. I don't know whether he looks back on this movie as being too woke or likes being politically incorrect towards gay people. Or maybe neither, because this writing probably isn't smart enough to try to be either. They just saw that everybody was shirtless and made jokes about that. As I said earlier, what I think made 300 homoerotic was how manly the movie was selling them as. If they leaned into that as well, some people might argue that it was ahead of its time in how it deconstructs masculinity. But this movie doesn't deconstruct masculinity, it just has a bunch of gay stuff thrown in there for laughs. If the characters had so much as tried to deny that anything here was gay and insisted that they were all manly men, that would be an improvement over this. As it is now, there's really only one scene where anybody so much as reacts with embarrassment. The common complaint about Seltzer and Friedberg is that they just throw references to stuff that will be dated in just a few years. Well, how's this for obscure 2000s references? The scene in question is a reference to a series of radio ads.
Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real man of genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. Warmongering latent homosexual.
A series of ads that were already meant to be comedic, so you can guess how well this movie can joke about it beyond, do you recognize this? Other than that, there are a few accidental jabs at their masculinity, like a scene where it shows that Leonidas literally has no balls or dick, or another one where he says that he doesn't trust the Oracle's prediction that they'll die in battle because she also said that their spray-on abs look fake. But even in the unlikely event that I'm not looking too deep into these jokes, it's mostly kept separate from the gay joke, so they can't really come together. But really, this duo's real sense of humor is the same thing as always. It also references many films, television shows, people, and pop cultural events of the time in a manner similar to previous films that Friedberg and Seltzer had been involved in, such as Scary Movie. They weren't involved in Scary Movie. 13 Spartans to defend their homeland against the invading Persians, whose ranks include Ghost Rider, Rocky Balboa, the Transformers, and a hunchback's Paris Hilton. No one is safe when the Spartans take on the biggest icons in pop culture. Most of these guys are only in it for like a few minutes at most. Also, the Persians didn't have the Transformers. At the end, Xerxes turns into a single off-brand Transformer. You must be so embarrassed not knowing your Meet the Spartans lore. The jokes are stupid, and a lot of them just revolve around bringing on some character from another movie or reality show or radio ad from the past couple years, often without even trying to make a joke about it. It does this a lot more than Starving Games did. All in all, this movie's humor is aimed at 12-year-old boys and nobody else. There's legit an extended scene where the Spartans just tell yo mama jokes. That scene was also an early role for Tiffany Haddish. Wikipedia says that her character's name was Urban Girl. In another scene, they visit an oracle, who is made to look like TV's Ugly Betty. I don't know what the connection is, and honestly, I don't think there's any connection here. I've never seen a full episode of this show, but I have a feeling that doesn't matter, because the parodies for everything except 300 in this movie are basically on that level. For the brief appearance from Ghost Rider, he shows up and then somebody throws a bucket of water on him and the fire on his head goes out. He then stops, drops, and rolls. I actually chuckled at that last part simply because this was near the end of the movie, and after so many jokes that were so much worse, my standards had dropped. A similar thing happened when they threw in the Hunchback from 300, except he's also supposed to be Paris Hilton for some reason. And it's pretty unfunny, but then her cell phone rings and her ringtone is the Humpty Dance. Another example of leaving the audience so starved for comedy it'll take some cheap shot so long as it's not as abysmal as the jokes surrounding it. So that's where the real humor lies here. Also, there are some jokes that could be funny if they just stopped at some earlier point. Like the very first joke in the movie. A Spartan official is examining newborn babies for deformities, he unwraps one, and it's a Shrek baby. A funny idea, and one of the few reference jokes that could have actually worked. Then it kept going.
Are you my mama? Because I'm ready to suckle the teat.
Here's another scene in the opening. In 300, a young Leonidas, or Gerard Butler, whatever, has to fight a wild beast. Here, that beast is revealed to be a penguin. It's like the killer rabbit scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Or actually, there was a skit in the actual show where an action hero has to fight a penguin.
See Ensign Oates' frank adult death struggle with the spine-chilling giant electric penguin.
Yeah, let's play more of that Meet the Spartans scene.
You've got happy feet.
It's another stupid reference. Also, the penguin talks like a gangster for some reason, and he takes a shit on Leonidas' face, and it's really gross. Probably the worst example of not knowing when to cut a joke, as well as the pointless reference humor, comes from the parody of the famous This Is Sparta scene. It starts out as a rare, actual parody of a scene from 300. It starts with Leonidas casually asking to continue this conversation in front of the pit of death, and the messenger not seeing anything wrong with that at all. When things go sideways, the scene shows how ridiculous that was that it happened to a simple messenger. It straight up stated that they would be freed if they had just let him go back home. And this could have kept going a bit longer in this direction if they had just stuck to him kicking more of the messengers into that hole. But then they decided to go down a different path. Britney Spears inexplicably appears in front of the hole in a barber chair, shaving her head. See, this is back when drug addiction was hilarious. And she acts wacky and drugged down, and it's supposed to be funny, but it's just long and pointless. And Leonidas kicks her in too. And then somebody else appears in front of the hole. It's only because I watched some YouTube video that briefly discussed this movie a few weeks before watching it that I knew who it was supposed to be. This is Sanjaya, a name I pretty much forgot existed. For my younger viewers, or probably some of my older viewers because even I barely remembered this guy, He was a contestant on American Idol who got popular among teenage girls but didn't make it near the finals. They don't even try to tell any jokes here, they just have him sing and you're supposed to laugh just because it was briefly famous. When he gets kicked down, he says something along the lines of, "I'm not gay." That's the closest to a joke this part has. And then Hulu went to commercial break. 2 minutes later, the movie came back and the American Idol judges were in front of the pit. Oh, this still isn't over yet? In the end, as mentioned before, King Xerxes reaches his final form, an off-brand transformer.
Equipped with advanced alien technology.
Leave Benny alone! He is a god king.
How does she feel about this playing in a movie that did not leave Britney alone? In fact, they make fun of her again in the scene that plays during the credits. Also, the movie ends with an unfunny reference humor scene of the Spartans accidentally attacking Lindsay Lohan as she leaves rehab. Once again, drug addiction was hilarious back then. But back to the Transformers scene. Shortly after that, Xerxes dies anticlimactically, but accidentally falls and crushes all the Spartans, which, I'll admit, is kind of a fun way to end this movie. Anyway, during the credits, we get an actually amusing musical number involving the cast, including that other shot at Britney, and then we get to the point where the credits scroll over a black screen. I checked the time, there's still 15 minutes left, and the movie has been running for only 1 hour and 7 minutes. This was before Marvel had fully trained people to stay after the credits, and it's a few minutes into those credits before they actually show anything, meaning that most people probably left at this part and only got a little over an hour of the movie. Not that they missed much. Maybe halfway through those credits, we get a really long stretch of random scenes. We get a scene of the Spartans with Hooters girls. I guess it makes sense they didn't make it into the actual movie since they're supposed to be gay. There's also more shots of Leonidas kicking different celebrities into the pit of death. Great. Including Ellen DeGeneres and Dane Cook, who they make fun of for being annoying and unfunny. Do you know how bad you have to be to make us side with Dane Cook? At one point in the movie, the Queen wears the black suit from Spider-Man 3. That was apparently enough to bring her back in the suit for a scene in New York City, a place which probably didn't exist in the actual movie. She hangs from a web on the side of a skyscraper. Suddenly, Donald Trump sticks his head out the window and says, "You're fired." That's the joke. It goes on for a little bit after that. He cuts the web, she takes his wig. That's not enough to convince me the joke of the scene is anything other than Donald Trump appearing to say, "You're fired." Whoa, be careful, he might get this movie canceled for that. Do you know how hard it is to be the worst joke in Meet the Spartans? After the second stretch of credits, there's a brief scene of Rambo dancing in woman's clothing. Nothing in this scene had ever appeared before, other than that actor doing the same Sylvester Stallone impression to play Rocky. Meet the Spartans apparently came out the same weekend as the fourth Rambo movie, so if you stay to the end of the credits, you'll be rewarded with a reminder that you could have watched something else. Anyway, like Salzer and Friedberg's other movies, this was widely hated by everybody, but it still opened at number 1 at the box office opening weekend, just beating Rambo by inches. It dropped 60% in its second weekend, but it still made $84.6 million on a budget of $30 million. But of course, with that reception, they would never make a sequel. What, you thought this was going to be another one of those things where they say that and then reveal that they made some obscure straight-to-DVD film? Not this time. Not even Kevin Sorbo wants to continue this one. Anyway, like most Salzer and Friedberg movies, this is more of a time capsule than a movie. This is what pop culture in 2008 looked like. You like the 2000s? This is the movie for you to put on and think, wait, no I don't. But this one actually feels like it had potential. Maybe these guys could make a decent movie if they just picked one film to parody and stick with it. And maybe hire some other writers to reject their worst ideas and tell them what could actually be funny with a little work. And together they can maybe write more than an hour of material. As of now, it's barely a movie. And if you watch it, it will treat you like you're really stupid. Okay, maybe I should switch to making this a tier list.
Later.
Ladies and gentlemen, the new bottom 100 ranking list. Let's hope I don't rank anything above 2.5 stars. I'm going to place this one between Hobgoblins and Left Behind, close to the lower end of the 1.5 rank. Anyway, like, share, and subscribe for more of this.